Okay.
I want to thank you all for your time and attention today. The name of the topic, our session is AWS Survival Kit, Protecting Amazon EC2 and RDS Workloads. Just a quick introduction. My name is Andy Fernandez. I'm the Director of Product Management at HYCU. I've spent my entire adult life actually explicitly focused on data protection, both on-prem, cloud, and SaaS as well. And this is something that is still dear to my heart. The topics that we're going to cover in the next 20 minutes, I really want to make this an action-oriented session because there's a lot that you're able to do once we're done with the session. But the first thing is I'm going to go over the problem statement. What are the challenges today? Whether you're an IT manager who is now modernizing applications within AWS, or you're on the DevOps side of the house, you both have very, very similar challenges when it comes to scale and being able to effectively protect your workloads. The other thing that we're going to do is provide instructional exactly on how Haikus can help you automate your entire backup and restore process for both workloads without a line of code, without any scripts, without CLI, all in a fully automated fashion. And if you stay towards the end, we have special access to a free backup and restore snapshot management service that is both for EC2 and RDS. And I'll show you exactly what that entails during the session. What I really want to focus on at the beginning, though, is I want to zoom out a little bit because the focus of today is AWS, and we're explicitly going to go and talk about AWS. But it's very, very important to understand what other types of on-prem infrastructure, SaaS applications that your organization is dealing with. Once we put that together, it'll make a lot more sense as to what the value of Haiku is. If you see a ton of old logos there, it's because I'm showing what the average environment looked like 10, 15 years ago of an organization. Fully on-prem infrastructure. I like to call it the castle. If you protect the castle and all the virtual machines and physical servers within the castle, your organization is golden. But what we saw about, I want to say 7 years ago, was a serious adoption, at least from a storage and archive perspective, of public cloud infrastructure. So you started to see, especially AWS, establish dominance in this space. A lot of organizations started to realize, especially from an archive perspective, to be able to send my backups, even use AWS as a DR target site. These were the use cases that really started, and then you started to see a lot more modernization. And even 6 years ago, you started to see your first spawns of SaaS applications where SharePoint used to be on-prem, Jira used to be on-prem, Salesforce used to be on-prem. They came out with their SaaS offerings. So even 6, 7 years ago, as an IT manager or as somebody within the IT department, you still had kind of a pretty decent small scale sprawl of environment to protect. Everything's still production lived on-prem. You had a couple of cloud workloads and you had a couple of SaaS applications that you had to protect. But if you go today, it is a completely different story. Public cloud infrastructure has proven itself. It's proven its reliability, its innovation, and its benefits. Now, of course, most organizations, unless they're brand new, are running some type of on-prem infrastructure as well. But every single day, we see more and more, not only organizations lifting and shifting, but actually modernizing their applications. If you talk to folks today, it all started with some EC2 instances, but now you're looking at RDS, you're looking at Aurora DB, you're looking at so many other services, functions, and microservices within AWS that are adopted. It is not simply just a couple of experimental workloads. But then the other area that's extremely critical as well is all of the applications that we see today that are SaaS applications, right? Anything from the DevOps side, like Snowflake, GitHub, GitLab, or even departmental SaaS applications like Monday.com, Adobe, all of these used to live on-prem. They used to live within virtual applications. And now they're all their own little universes, their own little set of SaaS applications. So what used to be a castle is now a completely disparate kingdom all over the world where you don't always have visibility into what actually is happening, let alone is this protected, is this not? So this is the reality that we all live in, and that this is proven by data, proven by use cases. I think we can all conclude here that this is a reality that every single person on this call is living in. Now, the challenge here was if you went back 6 or 7 years ago, really when SaaS started to become an adoption model, folks assumed that because they were taking care of the system level types of backups and DR, that they were fine, that they didn't need to ever perform a backup, that they didn't need to worry about restoring data themselves because the SaaS service has them covered. right? And then you started to see the publications of shared responsibility models. AWS has one, Jira has one, Salesforce had one. And basically they say the same thing, which is, look, we're going to give you an incredible service. We will keep it available up to the 5 nines. We will make sure that there's system level availability to you. But when it comes to your data, your compliance, it is up to you to ensure that you are compliant and that you can recover the data. So we started to see at least this myth being busted and people really starting to realize, okay, I do need to be able to protect these applications. But the challenge here is when you have disparate applications, disparate workloads all over in different infrastructure, you have a lot of challenges around visibility. Even knowing what is going on in the organization can be a challenge. We talk to CISOs every single day who, when we first ask them how many SaaS applications are in use, they tell me 5, 6, 7, the usual suspects, Microsoft 365, et cetera. But when you actually go through the exercise, there's 50, 60, 100. The average mid-sized organization has 200 of these. And that's not even counting, for example, AWS cloud services. So it's really becomes a checklist that every organization needs to think about, or what workloads am I using? Do I have visibility into them at any point in time? How am I protecting these in case something does happen? Am I following security best practices? And also, what does this mean for compliance? Am I still following the regulatory requirements that I have? But the real reason that we talk about data protection today, specifically within AWS, is there are 3 categories as to why everyone has to think about effectively backing up and protecting their instances and workloads within AWS. The first one is operational data loss. I call this almost Murphy's Law. These are things that happen every single day within an organization where data could potentially be lost. Whether it's an accidental deletion, a bug, version control issues, rogue administrators, you name it, this could happen at any point in time. These are the very, very frequent scenarios in which organizations need to be able to restore data to get back up and running and avoid severe disruption. The second is less frequent, but I really want to focus on the cyber attack area. SaaS applications are the number one exploited types of applications, and they are a massive target. So organizations need to think about as well is, how am I securing my data? Am I making my backup copies immutable? If or when an attack happens, what is my response process? Can I recover? How am I handling permissions? There is a huge level of questions, and Bert had alluded to the NIST framework to be able to follow as well. The third reason, though, is on the compliance side. A lot of organizations, they jump to cloud, they jump to SaaS, but they don't realize the retention periods, the governance requirements that they have. Now, AWS has done an incredible job of being a certified secure platform for people to operate in. But the question is, the customer still has their own compliance requirements. I'll give you an example. Healthcare organizations need to keep EHR data for 7 years stored, and they have to meet off-site copy requirements regardless of where that data is in production. So these are a lot of questions that organizations need to ask, but they all revolve around data protection. How are you backing up this data? Where are you keeping it? How are you copying it? And how long are you retaining this data for? Now, there comes a couple of challenges with that. And I'll be explicit here and using, for example, AWS as an example. But you take your average IT manager. You still have workloads on-prem that you have to protect. More and more, you're moving towards AWS. And you also have maybe Microsoft 365, Workspace, and even other applications that you're responsible for. All of them are business critical. All of them require backup and recovery. Yet there are different tools, scripts, and solutions for each one that are purpose-built for that specific one, right? You have your vSphere backups, you have your 365 backup, you have your AWS native backup that you're using. The problem with this is they're all disparate solutions. They all require different processes. They all have different requirements. Different levels of expertise are needed in order to perform very basic backup functions, right? This is what I like to call keeping the lights on. But even when you get specific to, let's take EC2 and RDS as an example, you still need to be functional with scripts, command line, using the AWS backup console. Now, if you're a developer, if you're a cloud architect, and you were, for lack of a better term, born in the cloud, this is not a big deal. The AWS backup has incredible capabilities. But for folks who are used to UI-based recovery, UI-based policy management, it could be a little bit of a challenge. And especially when you think about the backup operations that are required as your organization expands its use and continues to drive more PaaS, more database as a service, and infrastructure as a service within AWS. And this is just talking about AWS. This isn't even talking about every other workload that most organizations are dealing with. So this is kind of the lens that we take on how do we make people's experience within AWS and adjacent services much better, much more protected, with much less time spent on keeping the lights on and allocating all of that time to building things, which is what AWS enables you to do. And this is where we come in at HYCU. Just a little bit of a background. We are a data protection as a service platform. We are one of the largest investments by these VC organizations like Bain Capital, A-Crew, with very strategic investments from Cisco, Atlassian Ventures, and Okta. We have over 3,600 customers in over 75 countries. One of the favorite things to talk about HYCU is our NPS. We have an NPS of 91, and we are trusted by some of the most critical workloads in the world, from federal organizations to major commercial organizations like Pfizer, Honeywell, Toshiba, you name it. This is something that people have trusted both on-prem, in cloud, and in SaaS. We are here to protect the crown jewels of the environment. Now, one thing I wanted to mention as well, though, is the reality is every single organization is going to have disparate workloads. They're going to have some type of hybrid multi-cloud environment, not even counting SaaS. So the basis of what we looked at is, as a platform, as what HYCU does, we need to be able to natively protect all of these applications. And by that, I mean no agents, no workarounds, actual purpose-built data protection, leveraging the native APIs, the native snapshots. That's exactly what we're able to do with AWS. The first thing that we provide is the ability to always visualize all of the workloads that are running within your organization, regardless of they are. It's about making sure that you have one single visible point, almost one treasure map of all workloads and applications that are being deployed in your organization. Then we have our own internal marketplace. And when I say marketplace, this is the place where you can go and select all of the types of applications and infrastructures that you want to be able to protect. For example, you see RDS on there, you simply subscribe within the platform and you can immediately start protecting Amazon RDS EC2 instances. Another critical thing that we mentioned here, and Bert mentioned it as well, which is the NIST cybersecurity framework. When we look at kind of the history of cybersecurity, there's been an enormous focus on prevention, and rightfully so. You want to make sure that you set your organization up not to have attacks be successful. But the reality is that based on the volume, the severity, the sophistication of cyber attacks, your organization needs to be ready. So this is why we released something called R-Score. Think of R-Score as the FICO credit score assessment of how your organization is prepared to recover from a ransomware attack. It still takes a look at everything from the prevention perspective, networking, firewalls, education, best practices, employee training, all of that. But it also takes a look at your backup operations, your DR operations, your run books, your response rate. It takes a look at the entire continuum to make sure that you as an organization, regardless of what happens, are able to withstand and recover from a ransomware attack, even if it's successful. And ultimately, that's what our cloud is. HYCU's our cloud, data protection as a service platform, being able to protect your data wherever it is, giving you visibility, giving you access to always be able to protect it, and making sure that you can recover from ransomware. But let's focus specifically on AWS today. One of the things that I love about anything that we do within cloud infrastructure is that we make sure to never leverage agents. We want to work natively with the platform, with the infrastructure. That's why with HYCU, there is no deployment, there is no maintenance or configuration. This is a true SaaS. Once again, we leverage AWS Cloud Scale architecture, so there is no sizing planning exercises that you have to do. Everything that we've done from an architectural perspective is designed to be cloud smart, balanced for any region within AWS. And ultimately, we know that you have multiple workloads within AWS, but you also have workloads outside of AWS. We want to give you one place to be able to see, manage, and recover all of these workloads. But let's get into the fun stuff. All you need to do, well, we're available through the AWS Marketplace. We're a partner of AWS as well, but you simply subscribe, you add your account ID. All of a sudden, whether if you have Okta or Azure AD, you're able to automatically map out your entire infrastructure and all of the applications that are underlying that infrastructure, regardless if it's on-prem, if it's cloud, or if it's SaaS. So specific to the context of AWS, a lot of organizations start to see disparate adoption of workloads. Maybe your data science group, your IT group, your engineering group, DevSecOps have all adopted different services within AWS and outside of AWS, where we can help you visualize them all in one place. Then you can make the decision of, is this something that's worth backing up? Should I be worried about this not having a backup? It gives you that lens to understand, am I protected? Can I recover at any point in time? That's just the discovery process. And by the way, because we are natively working with AWS, leveraging their APIs, their native snapshots, we also automatically inherit permissions from AWS IAM. But here's the part there's two parts that are extremely important, which is the actual backup operation and then the restore operation. Now, as we mentioned with AWS backup, it's effective. It works. It's a snapshot manager that is effective, that you can create your own snapshots. You can script your way to automate it. But that's on EC2. RDS has its own separate backup function. So imagine as your organization starts to grow, you have to perform backup functions for each EC2 instance, all of your RDS workloads, and et cetera within AWS. What HYCU does so well is that, first of all, it'll automatically discover all of the instances that you have, both EC2 instances and active RDS workloads. From there, within one click, you can assign backup policies. You don't have to script this. You don't have to create any type of workarounds to have your backup scheduled. You simply can assign those policies. We have prepackaged policies, right? Think of your standard daily, every 6 hours, you name it. We have all these options, or you can simply create your own policies. So you can say, look, I would like to take a snapshot every 4 hours, and I would like to store this locally, and I'd like to store it externally for 2 years, 3 years. And it's completely up to you to decide. But the point is, there is no ongoing maintenance, no ongoing activities. Once you assign a policy, it will run in perpetuity 24/7. This is what we call a set and forget policy. You can assign policies for EC2. You can assign policies for RDS. It's done from the same place. It's managed from the same place. You never have to leave the same screen. The other piece that's extremely important, though, is actual restore process. Anybody can create a backup, but what about recovery? That's what really matters. That's the only reason we're actually performing backups. Well, what we're able to do is also give you the ability to restore from one place. For example, within EC2, there is no script that's official around file level restore within EC2. But with HYCU, you're able to perform a full file level restore of an instance. You're even able to search and go through the entire file catalog. So instead of having to recover an entire instance, if there's a deletion event, you simply recover the file that was restored or that was deleted, and you restore back into production. The other piece that's super important as well is disaster recovery is a completely different operation. That's AWS Elastic DR. That's a completely different function, completely different integrations and scripts that are required. What we're able to do is allow you to perform the cross-regional DR operations that you need to do within the same service. So that way for RDS, for EC2, you're able to not only manage the backup, but the DR as well and the restore process. No scripts, no CLI, no consoles needed, one place for all of these workloads. By the way, this extends outside of AWS as well. Another thing that I wanted to mention, though, is AWS does allow you to customize whatever you need to do with backup, right? You can use SNS, you can modify your notifications, but they all require disparate activities for each instance and each workload. What we're able to do is simply make these one-click operations. You can assign the policy. You can take a look and say, for this EC2 instance, I want a daily report. I want notifications of my backup jobs. I want notifications of my restore process. I always want to be informed with anything that happens to my critical workloads within AWS. You have the ability to automate the notifications. You can also fully customize whatever reports you need based on compliance, based on application types, backup tiers, restore processes, you name it. These are very critical when it comes to audits and regulatory checks as well. Another piece is, yes, we also inherit AWS Identity Access Management, but we also have our own role-based access control. So, for example, if you're an IT manager or within the DevOps organization, and you've got usual suspects who maybe are the ones performing deletions, or they're working on a very important active project, you can give them the ability to restore data themselves, or even assign their own backup policies. So, as an organization gets larger, and more people are provisioning disparate workloads all over the place, you have the ability to give them the power to back up and restore themselves. So then the IT manager is not carrying this enormous burden of backing up Kubernetes, of AWS, of 365, of Jira, et cetera, et cetera. And everything that we're mentioning here is designed not to require script. Of course, we have a REST API if you'd like modification, but we built this so that you don't need to modify anything with a script. So what I want to focus on now is I want to make sure that everyone gets access to this service. So everything that I've mentioned, there is a free tier available for you to be able to protect EC2 and RDS. If you scan this QR code, you do not need your billing rights to be able to do so. This is completely free and it's free for life. And what it does, it gives you a free snapshot manager where you're able to perform the exact activities that I just mentioned. So even if you're never going to buy HYCU, that doesn't matter because we recognize the value of AWS, the value of its services. What we focus on is offloading the boring stuff, the boring but important stuff of keeping the lights on so that you always have your data one click away from a restore process. By the way, if you're interested also in being able to protect AWS plus on-prem, we're able to do that. We're even able to do it for cloud deployments, Jira, Confluence, JSM, Salesforce, Okta, you name it. But the focus today is making sure that you're able to protect and automate backup processes within AWS. So I will also try to post a link to the chat of this as well, but you can scan this with a QR code. I promise you, you won't get 100 sales calls. You'll have a technical account manager reach out to you and just ask if you need help making sure that this is easy for you to use. But this is for you to use for free for life. I want to thank you all for your time and attention today.